Hi ladies, welcome back. Welcome to week number 2 of the Procession. I'm so glad you're here. So we had a weekly song by The Fray called Be Still. So this is the point that you will be listening to the song and opening up in prayer. Then take some time to introduce your group. So we don't use name tags at Moxie Ministries so that we learn each other's names. When there's a name tag, we look at the name tag and we never make a mental note of what that person's name is. And I just want to encourage you that if you're out in public and you see somebody from a Moxie group and you don't remember their name, say, I'm sorry, I don't remember your name. And they will be so glad to tell you. And I bet you anything, then the next time you see them, you'll remember their names. So don't be shy. Well, before we start, I want you to join me in the procession to the presence by doing a few silly things. Now let's remember that there's happy chemicals that can flow through our brains when we do some things with our faces. So I want you to smile at your neighbor, smile really big, then stick your tongue at your neighbor. Then I want you to do one more silly thing. I want you to shake your Moxie booty. So stand up and shake your Moxie booty. Yes, I really mean it. Shake your Moxie booty. So it's really important, ladies, to move our hips around. That helps us to get in our bodies and be present. I give you like 2 thumbs up if you shook your booty. Our key verse this week is, "Why do you look with envy, O rugged mountains, at Mount Zion where God has chosen to live? For the Lord himself will live forever." That's Psalm 68:16. So pause here, ladies. Pull out your heart, if you have a heart or a bowl with your questions in it, and pass it around the group so that everybody can choose a question. After you do the heart, then read Psalm 68:11 through 23. Then choose 4 women to read the 4 columns on the chart. Now this will prepare you for your teaching this week. Now remember our key verse. "Why do you look with envy, O rugged mountains, at Mount Zion where God has chosen to live, where the Lord himself will live forever?" That was Psalm 68:16. Now we see 2 mountains in our psalm. We see Mount Bashan and we also see Mount Zion. Mount Bashan was part of the current day Mount Hermon mountain range. This mountain range included Mount Sinai. These mountains are located in Syria. And the highest point, ladies, the highest point of that range is 9,200 feet. That's a big mountain. Now think about our quick question from last week. How have you been led out of Egypt? Think of the Israelites. They were led out of Egypt, weren't they? They left behind the gods of Egypt, the sun god, the animal gods, and the insect gods. Now the Israelites, they knew the one true God, but I'm sure over time, over the 400 plus years that they were in bondage, that they came to worship other gods besides Yahweh. So God took them out of Egypt into Mount Sinai, I believe to show them the great mountain so they would become in awe of a great God. Then he gave them the law so they would know how God's people were supposed to behave. They weren't supposed to behave like Egyptians. They were supposed to behave like Yahweh's people. So he gave them the 10 commandments. He told them, don't have any other God but me. Don't take my name in vain. Keep my day holy. Honor your mother and your father. Don't kill anyone. Don't commit adultery. Don't steal. Don't bear false witness against your neighbor. Don't covet your neighbor's wife, and don't covet what your neighbor has. Those are some pretty good laws, aren't they? Well, the 10 Commandments were the foundation of God's people, and God hoped to build on that. He hoped to build his people from there. So he took God's people out of Egypt to a magnificent mountain to meet a magnificent God, to gain awe for that one true God. He wanted to heal his people from the plunder, there's our word, plunder inflicted on them by the Egyptians. Then they left Mount Sinai to journey to the promised land. On the way to the promised land, Israel sent spies on a 40-day journey into the promised land. They came back with a terrible report of giants in the land. Now, this caused terrible doubt and unbelief in the people. This unbelief and fear caused the people to wander around in the desert for 40 years. Are you wandering around in the desert right now in fear? Let that fear go, ladies. Let the fear go. We don't need to have fear when we belong to the King of Kings. Don't forget, ladies, that in our passages this week, God gave the plunders of war to the women. I believe God will exchange the plunders of your wars with his treasures in him. He has great things for you. I believe God will let you out of prison to experience a life of freedom and abundance. I know for me, ladies, I've been married for over 34 years, with my husband for 35 years, and we just recently went through a 2-year desert period where we wandered around and we had to look at all the junk that we've let hang out in our marriage for 34 plus years. We had to, one by one, pull them out of our marriage so we could get down and have a good marriage. And God has done that work, and he's given us some treasures back in our marriage. Well, in our scriptures this week, we saw how Joshua killed the 5 kings. One of those kings was King Og of Bashan. Can you say that 3 times? Og. He was a giant. His bed was said to have been 13 feet long and 6 feet wide. Now that's a big dude, isn't it? That's even bigger than a basketball player. Now notice here that the number 5 is the number for grace. 5 kings that Joshua took on by his hands. 5. Guess what 5 represents? It represents grace. If you have never read any of Troy Brewer's books, this is a great book. It's called Numbers That Preach. Troy Brewer is a wonderful brother in the Lord. He rescues children from sex trafficking, and he gives them a home, and he gives them great care to recover from sex trafficking. So check him out. He's a great Bible teacher, and he's doing great things for the Lord. So God is the God of grace. He made sure to have Israel face their giants before they went into the promised land. And then they killed them, they boarded them up in a cave so that Israel could give their allegiance to the one true God. So Israel left behind Mount Sinai, Mount Bashan. They left its majesty, and this was after God dealt with some of their flesh. He had them demolish the idols that they made with their own hands, and he dealt with their enemies, the kings. He took them to Mount Zion. It's really literally a hill in Jerusalem. It's about 2,500 feet high versus 9,200 Bashan or Mount Sinai. This is the mountain where God said he dwells, where they were to rest from their enemies, where they were chosen. It was a place of peace, a place of salvation, a place to be entered freely. And it was surrounded by innumerable chariots. The unseen realm surrounded that hill. God was there. Well, once we embrace Mount Zion, there's no more need for the law, ladies. There really isn't, because the law becomes written on our hearts. When we love God, we don't have to be beaten up by a bunch of rules to want to follow him and live our lives for him. We trust in his goodness. We don't need a shaking, awe-inspiring mountain of fear to cause us to revere God. We just love him. We love him and we follow him because we know him. And that takes time, doesn't it? It really does. God took Israel to Mount Zion, a humble little mountain, and this was a humble God. God wanted to show his people that he was humble and that he didn't need to scare them into following him anymore. This same God, ladies, he came to earth. He was born in a stable. He rode a donkey. He hung on a cross for humanity. This same humble God will one day come back, ladies, and he will set his feet on Mount Zion again. Well, Mount Sinai, it's a mountain of power, versus Mount Zion is a mountain where there's no need for power, because its inhabitants trust the one who holds all the power. Ladies, do you trust him? Do you trust God? Well, I want to end here with Ephesians 4, 1 through 13. It's kind of a lengthy verse, but it's very powerful, and I just want to read it over you tonight. As a prisoner, that's how it starts, ladies. Truly it does. As a prisoner. And prisoner is one of our words, isn't it? As a prisoner for the Lord, then, I urge you to live a life worthy of the calling you have received. Are you living your life worthy of the calling you've received? So be completely humble and gentle. There's that word, humble God, humble mountain. Be patient, bearing with one another in love. Make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace. There's one body and one Spirit, just as you were called to one hope when you were called. One Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is over all and through all and in all. That means he's in you, ladies. But to each one of us, grace has been given as Christ apportioned it. This is why it says, and this is out of our scripture, ladies. This is why I'm using this. It says, quoting Psalm 68, when he ascended on high, he took many captives and gave gifts to his people. So we get to hear now, as I read further, it's going to tell you what those gifts are. What does he ascended mean, except that he also descended to the lower earthly regions? He who descended is the very one who ascended higher than all the heavens in order to fill the whole universe. So Christ himself gave the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the pastors, and teachers to equip his people, to equip them for works of service so that the body of Christ may be built up until we all reach unity in the faith and the knowledge of the Son of God and become mature, attaining to the whole measure of the fullness of Christ. We're almost done here. Then we will no longer be infants tossed back and forth by the waves and blown here and there by every wind of teaching, and by the cunning and craftiness of people in their deceitful scheming. Instead, speaking the truth in love, we will grow to become in every respect the mature body of him who is the head, that's Christ. From him the whole body, joined and held together by every supporting ligament, grows and builds itself up in love, as each part does the work. Ladies, are you doing your part? It's an important question. We should be doing our part. But here's the most important part of today. Have you allowed yourself to become a prisoner of the Lord and nothing else? Because that's where you will find rest. Or are you still imprisoned by your past, your addictions, your bitterness? What are you imprisoned by still? It's time to leave those things behind. It's time to rest in God's sanctuary. He wants us to rest. So take a look at the artwork. And the question of the week is, how often do you rest in God's sanctuary? So toss that around a bit, answer the question, be transparent, and then open up for a time of prayer. Share your prayer needs. So ladies, thank you for listening. I hope you had a great time here, and I hope you'll let your sisters in, and I just bless you. I bless you with great knowledge of the King. Have a great evening.